Hey, so I was gonna make this video like an hour ago when things were a little closer to the actual bottom, but I already went out looking for a job real quick, see if a certain place was hiring. Of course, they're not. So I have a very long story with crypto this year, as far as all kinds of stuff, meme coins, leading to like a spiritual awakening, basically. Seeing what I saw on X, specifically that the White House was following a an impersonator of David Sachs, a blatant scammer, which I had just been looking into minutes before I looked at the White House's following list. And the reason I got to that point of looking into David Sachs was when I got rugged in my own meme coin. I looked into a guy that I called out for being somebody that rugs coins. Went all the way to the bottom of his Twitter profile and found some My Lady stuff. And, you know, he had a My Lady profile picture anyway, but I found like this certain thread where it seemed the thread itself seemed culty, and especially because they would do hashtag New World Order and whatnot along with the photos. Anyway, at one point I thought I was kind of working for them, like what I perceived to be at first a cult of scammers. Yeah. And I was like liking and following all kinds of accounts that I could confirm as being part of this, what I perceived to be a cult at the time. At some point I realized there's no one on the internet that I can't confirm. Like even my parents, all my family seems to be connected with this cult, either knowingly or unknowingly. At some point I came to the conclusion it's actually, okay, we live in a simulation, and that's how the simulation is manifesting itself in my reality. Anyway, so I thought I was working for them by like, this is this infinite money glitch meme coin that I was interacting with, liking with 5 accounts, you know, liking every reply to their posts, following the accounts that were improbable spam with all 5 accounts so that they would get taken out of spam. I had, at the time, I had no choice but to assume that was my job as far as the cult was concerned. And in fact, there was somebody that even called me at one point. They said I'm just a slave or whatever. So that kind of reaffirmed that I was doing whatever just doing this bidding for a certain entity. And in return, the market was finally going in my favor. But eventually it got to the point where I got fed up with things not happening enough. Like I wasn't actually making any profit. Everything still would be rejection from break even, or like with Bitcoin just barely a new all-time high, and then everything shit again. I was specifically a little extra fed up when, so there's been at least a couple times throughout this year where it was obvious that the Matrix, the cult, whatever, set me up to interact with a certain thread. One of them I can remember was they were talking about old meme coins. At that time, my meme coin was already old. And like, some of these old meme coins need to wake up or whatever the fuck. And, you know, my meme coin is a dude with a fucking waking up to an alarm. The image of it is a dude waking up to an alarm with crypto going crazy or whatever. And so one of the comments was like, too bad they don't have an alarm clock, whatever, or something like that. So, the beginning of my awakening, I shilled my meme coin there and hoped for the best. I thought maybe they were waiting for me to do something specific, like, for example, there was a phantom thread and all these meme coin tweets underneath it, and so I took it as my job to unearth all of the probable spam and trying to find comments that weren't showing up, all kinds of stuff like that. The second one was that I got most frustrated at when nothing happened. Well, actually, something did happen. All right, so Dave Portnoy, very famous, he owns Barstool Sports. He tweeted a video about XRP. He sold it too soon because somebody said Circle's going to compete with it or whatever, and that's it. Now he could have made millions of dollars, but now he wants to cry, and that's it. Good night. I had already been trying to shill a song called Green Dildo Blues to Dave Portnoy prior to that. And that video was so obviously even more of an obvious setup than the first one I mentioned. Because Dave Portnoy has enough money, he's not going to care about missing out on a little XRP pump, especially compared to what I missed out on. I was long on it from 30 cents. It went to $3, above $3. Without me, it's a long story. I won't get into that. He got out around 270, whatever. The reason he tweeted that womp womp story was for me to shill the womp womp coin and the Green Dildo Blue song. So he wanted me to shill Green Dildo, the cult. I swear, like maybe they were prompting me to, not wanting me to. They were prompting me to shill the Womp coin via my Green Dildo Blue song. So I did. About 4 days after Dave's tweet, it would have been quicker, but because I was distracted with bad prices and stuff, it took me 4 days to reply to Dave's tweet. I initially saw it when it was new, but it didn't even register at first. There was such an obvious setup, I think. But anyway, 4 days after I shilled it, and then 4 days later, all of a sudden, there's a bunch of green dildos on the women's NBA court. One of them gets thrown and hits a kid in the face. Never before in history have green dildos been a thing. In any sport, as far as I know. But just so happens, 4 days after I tried to manifest a pump for the Womp coin that I was in, that manifests in my reality instead. So anyway, the whole story there was, that's when I kind of just decided to focus on trading, focus on my leverage positions. That led me to a few weeks ago when most altcoins dipped. Well, a lot of altcoins dipped about 90%. I was long on Luna Classic. I was long on Trump coin. I got liquidated there with what I had at the exchange, and that was starting from a year ago. I was in a position on a Luna Classic from a year ago where I initially made a few $100, and then I was down by like 500 the whole fucking year, waiting for it to just go back to break even and beyond. Eventually, Similar story with BCH, but I got out of that with a little bit of profit and then back in. I am the ultimate meme, ultimate crypto meme. I've done everything that traders are not supposed to do. I do it over and over again. Buy more than I can afford to lose. Too much leverage. Too many positions with leverage. It's partly why I thought my meme coin might be something. Because a lot like Hawk Tua, I considered her to be the ultimate human meme in general. Other than now, I realize Donald Trump really is above and beyond her, of course. And so that's why I dabbled in Hawk Tua at first. But I feel like I am the ultimate crypto meme guy. As far as exactly what not to do, what other people would find funny, perhaps, at my precise misfortune. The number of times I've been liquidated at an absolute bottom. Now, of course, I was wrong the last couple times because I was liquidated that one time I already mentioned when things went down 90%. I forget where Bitcoin hit that day, but I ended up using $30 that I had sent to try to avoid that liquidation, and it arrived too late that day. A couple hours after that liquidation, I longed Bitcoin again from like 114 after it had just bounced from wherever the fuck it came from. So even though on Discord from the top, about 123K, I mentioned, I typed it out, I'm going to be looking for shorts for a while. Now, of course, I changed my mind, days later, and I also said that. And I got back in a long. So I've basically been riding Bitcoin down since the tippy top. And I bought higher after one of the liquidations. So previously, I got liquidated. I get right back in. I got in at 114, and then I got liquidated again. I got right back in at the same price that I got liquidated at. Same position size. So it was as if I didn't get liquidated. I was just riding it down and used fresh margin to take the same fucking position. I wrote it from the tippy top down to the very bottom, which happens to be the 0.236 extension that I had acknowledged already, months ago, years ago, whatever it was, about a year ago. It's so bad. Like even just today, as highly leveraged as I was, too many positions and blah, 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 I would have survived it if not for my one final mistake today, which was too long BCH again. Right before. It was right after the stock market opened, whatever. It took maybe an hour after the stock market opened for it to start to look, I got a little bit comfortable enough so that I could go to the bathroom. And the second I got in the bathroom, that was it. Bitcoin, dump, dump, dump. So by the time I was out of the bathroom, basically, I was already dealing with absolute verge of liquidation again. It took a few hours to actually get to that point. There was almost an hour where I would be in and out of having zero available margin. It was so close. I was, max leverage on everything. And I get to the point where I'd have zero available margin, but it would pop back up to like $9 or $10. Anyway, yeah. It's all stupid. Yesterday, instead of just staying the fuck out of BCH after I missed out on $5 profit that I should have had, I was just about to fucking set a stop loss right at the tippy top yesterday when it came down from like 530. And I always think what are the chances that particular time is going to be the time where it just dies like that? So while I'm hovering with my stop loss, but not setting it because I wanted to figure out where I'm going to set it first, seeing where it's going to bounce and where will I set it after that, but it plummeted. So then I was such an idiot. It was getting close to the daily open. I wasn't really acknowledging that. Trying to long it in the evening after it had just pulled back rather harshly right before the daily open. So I was in and out, in and out, in and out, according to my confidence at the time. And then the last time I got out yesterday was horrible because instead of panic selling my long, I used something like 60, 70% of my available margin to enter a short, which was 3 times bigger than my biggest position ever on BCH. 6 BCH I was short on momentarily. Now, I was already, way too over leveraged. I couldn't do that. And of course, it went down just barely enough to have, I could see $1 profit for like a second. It was too slow to get it. Next thing you know, I had to close that at a loss. So I paid fees to get in that 6 BCH short, took the loss, paid fees to get out. And I also, instead of just getting out, I accidentally did a reverse position. So I didn't just buy 6 BCH to get out. I market bought 12 BCH. 6 to get out and 6 to get in along by accident. So all the more fees paid for that market buy. And then again, of course, it immediately starts coming down after I do that. So I had to sell that at a loss. I sold most of it at a loss. I held on to about one of them, 0.8, which was I was more than double what I should have had based on what I had been riding for weeks prior. Like the 99K low that I barely survived, for example. I was long on 0.3 BCH, I believe, 0.3 BCH and, 5 Litecoins, about 0.1 Bitcoin. Oh, yeah, and fucking 40 Trump coin. So, yeah, I tried to let Bitcoin Cash bounce last night when I was long on 0.8. Just try to make up for the mistakes that I had made with market buys and sells. Just, a little fucking relief rally, dead cat bounce, whatever, anything would have, $15 or so. That's all I was looking for, but no, it went the other way, of course. So I got out of it last night finally. I got back in Picoin when I shouldn't have because I was already over leveraged. But that made me about $10 this morning, which was, about half of the money that I lost with that Bitcoin Cash shit that I mentioned a minute ago. If I had just stopped there after making that $10 and just walked away for the day after that, I would still be in my positions and be extremely confident that I have survived the low and that I will come out on top. But nope. Because I had been long on 0.8 BCH the previous night and I just made that $10 back, I'm like, well, the market seems kind of healthy right now. The stock market was nice. Bitcoin was nice. It already had fulfilled a target from the hourly chart based on a fucking inverted hammer. I think it had at that point anyway. Yeah. But nope, I got back into 0.8 BCH long to try to make up for yesterday evening when I was in and out all night. And I lost like $15-20 just panic selling every time I'd get back in and it would dump more. And it's because I got in that 0.8 BCH long this morning that I no longer have any of my positions or any hope of getting any of my money back. But see, it was none of the other liquidations was an actual, a true liquidation for me. The other ones I still had money to fall back on in my Phantom wallet, somewhere. This time, it's actually it. I've got like $13 in my Phantom wallet. As I watch all the coins that I've been long on pump from the lows that I was just forced to sell because of my stupidity. I blame the Matrix and the cult to some extent because we just got rate cuts. The stock market's been at all-time highs. World peace. To me, this doesn't make sense that we've been so fucking bearish for so long amid, with all this positive stuff. So to some extent, I blame the market manipulators, but of course, I recognize how fucking stupid I am, and I blame myself for things such as getting back in BCH this morning. I am a wreck now. I am an absolute wreck. This is a decade of watching charts every waking minute, aside from, I had a job a couple times, briefly within the last decade or so. But even when I had a job, every waking minute outside of my job was crypto, 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 waiting for my alt season and missing out on XRP, even though, I was in it for a year or two with leverage prior to it doing what it did. And, the cult messes me up right before it finally happens, forcing me to verify my identity on an exchange I didn't actually, wasn't in my name. Lock up my money for X amount of time. Yeah, dude. I've been taught that lesson probably about 50 times now. I keep going back to it. I told myself a long time ago I will never put any more money in crypto. It's either I succeed with what I got or I go bust. And this is the point now where I am bust. The only thing is so there's been screenshots over the years where you see these people say that they put $2 in a meme coin. They came out with, tens of thousands, blah, blah. I've been adamant to hold that South Park Sucks coin because out of all the bullshit that I've seen do really well in the meme coin world, my favorite show, one of the best shows in the world, advertising a meme coin. It's not directly linked. It's just a regular human, supposedly, or whatever, launching a meme coin after the South Park mentioned a meme coin. But anyway, that's my only hope is if that pumps to $1 billion, then I have something significant to work with again. I got like $5 in that. It should be like 40, but of course it's been a rug so far ever since there was a good pump at first. When Bitcoin bottomed off to 99K, I was just starting to say it's starting to look like a rug because it was crossing two of my trend lines, a resistance and a support line, where they were intersected there. South Park Sucks was falling through right near that intersection. Oh, great, that fucking looks like a rug. And then it went from 1 million or just under 1 million to 4 million in like 5 minutes. Ultimately up to about 7 million. I had a target of about 12 million, I think, based on 1.618 extension, but of course we can't reach my target, so I'm down with $6 instead of Oh, I know, man. I know. I was in my leverage positions. If I had survived the bottom, which again, it was a $10 difference, something like that. 10 more, even that $6 of South Park Sucks coins. Well, that's what it was when I considered selling it earlier anyway. It's less now, but even that $6 of South Park Sucks coin at the time, if I had sold that and sent it, that probably would have allowed me to survive. And that would have been $20 back to, back to wealth eventually. I know for a fact basically that Trump coin going back up near all-time highs. At the very least, like $13. So that would have been a position that would have closed in the green, most likely very, very green. Bitcoin, technically, I would have had to get above all-time high if I was to not make money on any hedges on the way up there in order to break even. But that also would have been a win eventually, because I know alt season is not done yet. Bull market is not done yet. Litecoin, I was already out of it, got back in that, so that's another big regret. The Matrix gave me a chance to get out of Litecoin without a loss a few days ago. And it just so happened that it hit with precision a trend line I had drawn hours before to assess where I might want to sell. With absolute precision, I wasn't watching the line at the time. Gets rejected, and I sold it in that moment, coincidentally. But I also got right back in with the full position size. Instead of just 5, I could have done 1 Litecoin instead of 5. And before I sold that at the tippy top, I was selling early, and I was content with only having 2 or 3, whatever. This is what I want to do. I've been dying to reduce the risk of this Litecoin. And I just rode it all the way down again. So leverage trading, honestly, if you're not me, it's not that bad if you learn what you're doing. If you learn how dollar cost, average into short-term positions, set a stop loss as you do it. Or just use really low leverage and keep, whether it's over the course of an hour, a day, it's better than what I did, which was when I'm bullish on something, I just go in with a position that I feel will be significant. And it's always significant in the wrong way only. Anyway, I'm basically just out here doing this so that I'm not looking at the chart while it pumps without me, because this is the ultimate green dildo blues situation for me. It was bad enough I was going to have to miss out on various things, such as Pivx or probably Womp coin. I was trying to make some money back with leverage so that I could get back in these memes that I believe in, particularly Womp and my own. But long story short, I guess this is kind of the point of the video, the main point I'll get to, and then I'll end it there. The main point is, when you're trading Bitcoin, whether you use leverage or not, You got to completely ignore fundamentals. You got to completely ignore all the news. The chart is the only thing that matters. The trend is your friend. If it's relentless down, you're better off taking a short. You know, I've said it multiple times over the years where, holy shit, when my alerts get set off this bad, this frequently, this is what happens. It leads to horrific conditions. I should have known. For over a month, probably, it's been like as soon as I set an alert, it gets set off. Even in the bullish situation, like in the very short term, when things were bullish, they were annoyingly so for the most part, other than that Litecoin pump. So what was my point again? Yeah, just ignore the news. Because like when they do the rate cuts, for example, on X, you'll see all these various well-known accounts talking about how rate cuts are the next big thing, the next big catalyst that matters. It's going to fucking send everything to the moon. And we get the first one, stock market goes up, crypto doesn't. Get the second one, same fucking thing. We get the government reopening, similarly. In the same situation, like this, the same people that you would see hyping up the rate cuts would be hyping up, not necessarily the same people, but some people would say the next catalyst is when the government reopens. And it makes sense to some extent, even though it didn't make sense. Like when the government was shut down, I'm like, good, fuck them, who needs them? I was still bullish on crypto, it doesn't fucking matter to me. But based on what it did when the government shut down, since the government shut down, it made sense to some extent that the government reopening would be a bullish catalyst. So I, tried to go along with that, along with just my general optimism and overconfidence. But it's all a scam, man. What I mentioned that I perceived as a cult at the start of the year, they run everything. The White House, the news, and I guess with their goal is to keep people in 9-to-5s, doing the 9-to-5 grind. I guess that's their goal. So just keep that in mind when you're doing your trading, that you can only trust yourself. Well, you can only trust the chart to give you anything useful, rather. You can't, I can't trust myself, of course. Every decision I've made in crypto has been a bad one. But so similarly, you might not be able to trust yourself. But ignore the bullshit. Whether it's a simulation or a New World Order cult, Charlie Kirk's death was faked. Absolutely, I'm 99.8% sure. Holographic reality, simulation, I don't know what the fuck is going on. But rings do not morph from one finger to the other while somebody is being fatally shot. I wish I could say, hey, find me on stream. I'm streaming 24/7 on D Live and Kick. Of course, D Live wasn't working lately, but Kick I've been on 24/7 for the most part. But now I just gotta look for a job, and there's no point in streaming it when I have no skin in the game. So to some extent, this is my farewell as a crypto personality. You know, I was tempted to be a crypto personality to some extent over the years. I deleted most of my videos or I made them private, but you know, I nailed the top a long time ago, 13.7K type shit. Like while that was happening, I was live streaming it. Like the video was titled "Trying to Nail a Medium Term Top at 13.7K." Fucking $2,000 down, like really quickly while I was bitching about it. If you do leverage trade, I recommend one thing at a time, 2 at most. And take your losses early if there start to be losses. Even though like there's been plenty of times where my small losses or my even substantial, you know, almost 100%, you know, losses ended up being at least break even. You know, it's much better to take a $5 loss as soon as it starts going against you rather than let it ride down for weeks. That's common sense, of course. And it becomes the bane of your existence every day, at every moment you're awake, and even when you're asleep, you get woken up by alerts of it. Yeah. Good luck, everybody. Better luck than me. Apparently my camera's dead, or am I just in the dark? Oh, yeah, all right. Yeah, all right, good luck, goodbye.